announcement that Negro League statistics will be incorporated as official alongside those of the majors is long overdue. We all know that. And also a form of redemption and acknowledgement of what was already known. And that is that Negro Leaguers were major leaguers. These players weren't in the majors at the time because of a lack of ability. It was because they weren't allowed. Second point I want to emphasize at the outset is how important the Seamheads initiative has been to uncover and compile as complete a statistical record of the Negro League game, and it deserves much credit for MLB's recognition of the leagues. I'll share an example of its work a little later. Alongside these records, the texture of the game, its nuance, its drama, its professionalism, its excellence, and the passion of those who played also needs to be shared as part of the American experience. I hope to accomplish some of this today by looking in depth at William Johnson. So I'll cut to the chase. Judy Johnson was special. He was the 6th Negro League player inducted into the Hall of Fame. I wish I had met him. This photo of Judy, interestingly, one of only a few that you can find, is my first memory of him. A little unusual for a typical photo of a ball player. Most seem to be of players batting or pitchers wheeling away. Here, Johnson in his Pittsburgh Crawfords uniform is either posing or actually readying for a batted ball. Hands and gloves on knees, legs bent. It is fitting that this is his most famous photo. Judy was a decent batter, but he was a really good fielder. The Centennial Negro League Bobblehead Series has Judy not batting, but fielding, charging the ball as he was known for. So let's begin at the beginning. Judy was born in Snow Hill, Maryland, near the turn of the last century. The youngest of 3 children to William and Annie Johnson. Sometime in his early childhood, the Johnsons moved 130 miles north to Wilmington, where his father found work as a seaman. Somewhat unique among the Negro League greats, we're fortunate to have Judy's own narrative to help weave his story. This is thanks to historian John Hallway, who interviewed a number of Negro Leaguers in their retirement, including Johnson himself. Hallway's books, and here is one, the famous first one on black ball stars, are essential to anyone interested in the oral history of the game. So today I'm inviting Judy to help share his life by quoting him extensively. Where we can do so, the voices of players and their families are important to draw on. So, Judy's father evidently knew Jack Johnson, the acclaimed boxer, and alongside that, as a licensed trainer, he hoped to spur a boxing career for young William. Now, Judy had other ideas. I was more interested in playing baseball, he said. He even confessed that his sister was a better boxer anyway. So baseball it was. And alongside school and chores, like any American boy, William was drawn to the baseball diamond. As a teenager, he recalled, I thought I was pretty good. I figured I was the best around. Now I wanted to move up. Now Chester had a pretty good ballpark just above the team I was on in Wilmington, the Rosedale squad. Chester, they'd pay me a couple of dollars and trolley fare. There weren't any buses then. They were my first professional club. Chester was the epitome of the local semi-pro team. Every community had one. or even more than one if it was a good-sized town. Semi-pro, meaning a foundation of locals who loved to play and who helped on a volunteer basis to organize a team, a place to play, and a schedule. The pro part was finding the money to bring in ringers to shore up the side. And for many towns, getting good players meant being colorblind. So while there were lots of teams that were only white or only black, there were many that were also integrated, even in these days. After all, winning was what counted. What comes next is a common theme. The semi-pro teams played their peers in their geographic area, and they also played pro teams, university teams, high school teams, you name it. The common denominator was baseball. So Johnson continues his story. I must have impressed the manager of the Philadelphia Hilldale Club, this when Judy was playing with Chester, because he asked me to play with them on Thursdays and Saturdays at their field up in Derby. Sundays, they'd go to Atlantic City as the backrack Atlantic City Giants. Same club, just different suits on, like the Globetrotters. Now, the practice Johnson experienced was one of player sharing during the First World War, when rosters were depleted by call-ups for the war effort. Judy goes on. For all of this, I got $5 a day. Once the frontline ball players returned from military service, Johnson would find himself on Hilldale's minor league, the team called the Madison Stars. Now, the Stars were owned by wealthy black theater owner John Gibson and managed by Dan McClellan, who was an outstanding pitcher during his career. The team had their own ballpark in Philadelphia, located at 34th and Reed Street. So, what about his nickname? Well, let's ask Judy to tell the story. When I left home in 1920 to play in Philadelphia, they had a fellow named Judy Gans, a first baseman, never much of a hitter, but a good fielder, and they said I looked so much like him, they called me Judy, too. By 1921, Johnson established his credentials and was considered worthy to be with the Hilldale Club full-time. This was a big deal because Ed Bolden, the owner and business manager of the team, had fast become one of the preeminent entrepreneurs in the sport. Hilldale had started unpretentiously in late 1916, and by the early 1920s had become a quality franchise. Financially stable, the premier black team in Philadelphia, and highly competitive with its Eastern counterparts, and a place where the players wanted to play. Hilldale in the 1920s was kind of like the Pittsburgh Crawfords in the 1930s. Both teams took off quickly, became winners, and then unfortunately lacked the staying power to survive longer term. But this is another story, and Courtney Smith, our speaker on September 18th, will talk about Ed Bolden, a subject she knows well. She wrote the book on him. Johnson would spend the decade with Hilldale, winning 3 Eastern Colored Championships with the team and appearing in the first 2 Negro League World Series, the first of which was one for the ages, in more ways than one. I'm calling this the first of my 3 digressions today regarding Judy's career that I want to highlight anecdotally. My purpose, as I mentioned earlier, is to delve into the nuance of the game and its drama that makes these histories integral to baseball's official record, alongside the stats that Seamheads has been able to compile, leading to Major League Baseball's declaration that the Negro Leagues are official major leagues. So bear with me as I go into some detail on this game. This is Game 8 in the first Negro League World Series that took place in 1924 between the Kansas City Monarchs and Hilldale. When these end-of-season contests become better known as part of MLB's integration of the stats and stories of the game, this World Series is going to get some airplay. Larry Lester, a historian and leader in the thinking of the Negro League game, deserves a lot of credit for the story around this particular series. He's written a phenomenal book on it that I highly recommend to you. This book and the newspaper stories of the day and the player reminiscences that came later speaks to a worthy contest of two heavyweight teams and a Greek drama to boot. This was a 10-game series. If it came out as a draw, 5-5, that would have been okay. It was played in 4 different cities: Philadelphia, Baltimore, Kansas City, and Chicago. This World Series was a showcase event for the African American community, and so league officials wanted to spread the wealth among a number of cities, so the games weren't just confined to Philadelphia and Kansas City. It was supposed to be a great pitching, that is to say Hilldale, contest versus great hitting, the Kansas City side. But both teams had their share of each. So here we are, Game 8, taking place in Chicago to make Negro League National League President Ruth Foster and the owner of the Chicago American Giants happy. The series stands at 3 games apiece with 1 tie. Now, at Game 8, all of the remaining games are pivotal, and all will be in Chicago after 2 in Philly, 2 in Baltimore, and 3 in Kansas City. So here it is. Going into the bottom of the 9th, the Monarchs are the home team in this contest. Hilldale is up 2-0. Bottom of the 9th, 2-0 Hilldale. This game, this inning, this Hilldale collapse is known for one play in particular, and I'll get to that. But in fact, there were a number of plays and managerial decisions that set this up as an amazing comfort behind victory for Kansas City that eventually led to their series triumph. So here they are. Factor 1. A pre-series managerial move put several players out of their normal position. Judy Johnson moved from third to short to replace the injured Jake Stevens. Biz Mackey was at third base and not available to catch, the position that actually got him into the Hall of Fame some years later. Factor 2, an in-game managerial non-move. Hilldale manager and second baseman Frank Warfield had previously inserted catcher Joe Lewis as a late inning replacement for Louis Santop, another future Hall of Famer, in games 3, 5, and 6. Well, why not Game 8? No one, including Santop himself, also, as I said, an eventual Hall of Famer, denied that his catching skills had diminished over the years. The goal was to have his bat in the lineup, which had worked out well given his .333 batting average in the series, and his driving in had the score held in Game 8, its winning run. Factor 3. After a fly out to left to start the bottom of the 9th, Monarchs pitcher Bullet Joe Rogan, yet another Hall of Famer, hit a slow roller to Mackey at third. Yes, Rogan is still in the game, and both he and Hilldale pitcher Rube Curry would go the distance that day. Mackey could not make the play. Johnson, a solid third baseman known for his ability to charge balls hit to him, might have, but he was playing out of position at short. Factor 4. After a ground out in which Warfield at second could not get the lead runner, Dobie Moore hits a routine grounder to short, but it takes a bad hop on Johnson, and Moore is on safely. No error was issued on the play. We don't have the TV highlights to know how that went, but there are now 2 on and 2 out, and the score still 2-0. Factor 5. After a clean single by Hurley McNair scoring Rogan and making the game now 2-1, Curry hits batter Heavy Johnson. Yes, that was his nickname, Heavy Johnson, and he was a big guy. But Curry was rattled, and the hit by pitch loads the bases. Factor 6. 2 out. Frank Duncan is up. He is 3 for 29 in the series, but Monarchs manager Jose Mendez lets him bat against Curry. And this is the at-bat that gets all of the attention. It is unclear from the accounts what the count was, but Duncan hits a foul ball pop-up behind home plate. The wind is blowing, the ball is moving, and Santop draws a beat on him, still in foul territory. The ball hits the heel of his glove and bounces out. The box score gives Santop an error, and Duncan stays alive. 7th and last factor. On the next pitch, Duncan hits a ground ball to Mackey at third. Some accounts say it went through his legs. Others are kinder and just say he misses the ball. The ball goes into left field and 2 runs score. Kansas City 3, Hilldale 2. What a game. Now this presentation is about Judy Johnson, not Louis Santop, but it is worth saying that this event near the end of Santop's career devastated Santop, as he was given full blame for a loss in which he was only one of 7 factors that influenced that bottom of the 9th. Although Hilldale would win Game 9, the Monarchs took the last game and won the series 5-4, one tie. An amazing series, one that deserves a lot of attention in World Series lore for all of the game. Now, Hilldale got its revenge next year when the 2 teams met again in the World Series, this time with Hilldale winning 5-1. And Judy was on that squad as well. So let's shift gears. Judy finished out the 1920s with Hilldale, including 1929, a year that saw the stock market crash and the onset of the Great Depression. Some teams were better able than others to navigate the country's economic decline, and one that was positioning itself for an extended run of greatness was the Homestead Grays, owned by Cumberland Posey. In early 1930, Posey raided Hilldale, as the saying goes, and signed Johnson and Oscar Charleston, another future Hall of Famer, to the Grays. Johnson, now 30, with a decade of experience under his belt, shared managerial duties with Posey, serving as manager in the field. The Homestead lineup that year included, in addition to Charleston and Johnson, Vic Harris, Jake Stevens, Buck Ewing, George Scales, Smokey Joe Williams, yes, another Hall of Famer, George Britt, another lefty pitcher, Lefty Williams, and Cheney White. Oh yeah, and by the way, someone by the name of Josh Gibson, a 19-year-old Pittsburgher. The Grays of Pittsburgh would finish in first place among the Eastern Independent clubs by virtue of their head-to-head record against other teams in the East that year. Pretty decent record, 45-15-1. That 1930 season was the debut of Gibson and is the story that is the second aggression we're sharing today. So it's July 25th, 1930, and the Kansas City Monarchs have traveled east as part of their exhibition schedule to play the Grays in several meetings in Western Pennsylvania, most notably at Forbes Field, which the Pirates had contractually agreed to share with Homestead. Now, the Monarchs had recently introduced an innovation to the game, a portable lighting system, these are actual pictures of it, that allowed teams to play a night game, adding another ticketed event to a daily schedule that often already involved a couple of games that afternoon. The night game was a big deal, promising to draw even more fans buying tickets and refreshments after the end of the workday. And so here we are, the Monarchs and Grays in action. We'll again invite Judy to tell the story. Well, we were in the clubhouse trying to discuss signals because we had never played a night game, any of us. Buck Ewing was catching, and when Buck got down to give the signal, why, Smokey Joe Williams couldn't even read the signal, see his hand. Williams misunderstood the signal, and Ewing split his hand right down. My subcatcher was in right field, I think that was Vic Harris. He wouldn't come in to catch. He was afraid. But here we are. Forbes Field is packed. Josh Gibson was sitting in the stands, him and a bunch of boys who played sandlot baseball. I went over and I asked if he'd catch. Yes, sir, Mr. Johnson, Josh said. So I had to hold up the game, let him go into the clubhouse, and put on a suit. But Josh would stay on the Grays roster for the rest of that season and return the following year to play on what some consider one of the best Negro League teams ever, the 1931 Homestead squad. Johnson would return to Hilldale in 1931 under the promise of new ownership of the Hilldale squad, financial stability, and hopefully a steady paycheck in uncertain economic times. That promise for Judy would be short-lived. He'd be with Hilldale in 31, but in 1932, the franchise would close its doors mid-season. Well, Johnson signed with the Pittsburgh Crawfords later in that 1932 season, and he'd finish his career with Pittsburgh, playing through 1936. The Crawfords, as I mentioned before, were up and coming. Gus Greenlee, local Pittsburgh business magnate, jump-started the team from its earlier semi-pro status. And by the way, Josh was on that late 1920s, 1930 Crawford sort of semi-pro team when Judy invited him to catch for the Grays on that fateful July evening in 1930. Greenlee was very ambitious and very competitive with crosstown rival Cumberland Posey. And in 1933, Greenlee helped form the second Negro National League of Eastern teams, filling the void of the collapsed Eastern Colored League from a couple of years before. Greenlee also spearheaded the East-West All-Star game that debuted in 1933, the same as the Major League All-Star game. And this was a contest that Judy helped inaugurate. More on that in a little bit. The Craws were the league champions in 3 of the next 4 years, 33, 35, and 36. And also, according to Seam Heads, actually had the best record in the league in 1934, finishing second in both halves of the season with a better aggregate record than the first and second half winners, the Philadelphia Stars and the Chicago American Giants. Johnson was on the 35 Crawfords, another candidate as the greatest Negro League team ever. SABR's book on this is also worth a great read, detailing the biographies of the players and the story of the season and the games. Who were Judy's teammates in that glorious run? They included Satchel Paige, Josh Gibson, Oscar Charleston, Cool Papa Bell, Ted Page, Sam Streeter, Leroy Matlock, Jimmy Crutchfield, Sam Bankhead, Judd Wilson, Willie Foster, and Harry Concannon. Quite a who's who. 7 of those, including Johnson, are Hall of Famers. By now, Judy was in his mid-30s. His batting average had dipped some, and he had probably lost a step. In early 1937, Gus Greenlee was facing legal and financial problems, presaging the team's eventual demise. The Crawfords actually came in last in 1937, improved some in 38, but then would be sold and moved to Toledo for its 1 year in Ohio before the Crawfords' name would disappear. What a decade for the Pittsburgh Crawfords. But Johnson would not be around to see out the Crawfords as he had with Hilldale, his other team of note. So this is my third digression, and it's the story of the trade. Here are the details. Gus Greenlee was facing pressure from local law enforcement authorities in 36, allegedly on his numbers racket business and some illicit dealings in the city. This threatened his finances, so he proposed sending Judy and Josh to the Grays, mainly for $2,500, reportedly the largest sum involved in a player deal in black baseball to date. Eventually, the trade was consummated, as the Pittsburgh Courier reported. Quote, "The biggest deal in the history of Negro League baseball was completed on Saturday morning when catcher Josh Gibson of the Pittsburgh Crawfords and third baseman Judy Johnson of the same club were sent to the Homestead Grays in exchange for catcher Pepper Bassett, third baseman Spearman, and $2,500 in cash. Unquote. Well, what happened next? Let's give Judy the stage again. Judy was pretty fed up. He threw in the towel. He said, "I could have played longer, but it was getting rough." There is a saying among the Negro League fraternity that they never drop the ball. Players would play year-round in all seasons, often 2 games a day, against all comers. And Judy was no different. He was highly sought after and was part of the inner fraternity, joining teammates and rivals alike in multiple settings. One element was barnstorming against major leaguers. In 1926, for instance, after the World Series, Hilldale played an American League All-Star team that included Heine Manush, George Burns, Jimmy Dykes, and Lefty Grove. Records for the series are incomplete, but indicate at least 3 Hilldale wins to 1 loss over the All-Stars, including 2 losses by Lefty Grove and a .374 batting average by Johnson. Another facet of the game was the off-season in Florida and in the Caribbean. Judy competed in Florida in the Winter Series between the famous Palm Beach Hotels, the Breakers, and Poinciana. This series often served as a spring training source for some of the Negro League players. He also played in Cuba during the late 1920s and into 1930-31. And records show he had a batting average of .333 in those games. And as I mentioned before, the East-West Colored All-Star Game. Judy was in the inaugural game in '33, hitting a pinch hit single. In '36, he appeared in his second and last All-Star game, going 1 for 2 with an RBI as the East defeated the West 10-2. Now, these next 2 slides are not meant so much as eye tests as they are often found in the African American newspapers that carried the game. So let me show you screenshots of Johnson's career batting and fielding stats. You can see on this basic batting chart, Johnson's career batting average with Hilldale at .309, and overall average for .296 for all the games that are captured here. You can see the year-by-year rendering of his performances. The fielding stats is similarly arrayed. It shows a career fielding at .937. The struggle on the fielding stats side is that sometimes the box scores didn't go into the level of detail on fielding as much as batting. But this is a very important foundation for the game. And I really commend you to go to seamheads.com to have a look at and surf through the statistics of teams and players and the games they played. And here are 2 stories from Wilmington and Pittsburgh papers that highlight games Judy played in with Hilldale and the Crawfords, respectively, that are at the core of the primary research that Seamhead experts build on, game by game, box score by box score, to get the statistical record straight, and that now, in the eyes of Major League Baseball, are considered official, thanks to the rigor that has been brought to bear. So we're rounding third and heading home on Judy's story. He, in fact, retired in the late 1930s and located permanently with his wife, Anita, to Marshalltown, Delaware, in the Wilmington suburbs. But he kept his hand in the game while working various jobs. He would witness the color barrier coming down thanks to Jackie Robinson. And he shares in his recollections with historian John Hallway something of the following chronology that confirmed not only his love of the game, but his important role as a bridge from the Negro to the major leagues. In '52, he began serving as a scout for Connie Mack. Connie knew about Judy because Hilldale and the Philadelphia A's shared a city. Connie was happy to have Judy come and help scout. In '54, he became the first African-American hired to coach in the majors, attending spring training to ease the transition of black rookie players for the A's. Now, please note, Buck O'Neil became the first African-American coach to coach during the regular season, but it suggests that Judy was in his coaching capacity in spring training, perhaps the first overall. In the late 1950s, he joined the Milwaukee Braves as a regional scout. And he jumped to the Philadelphia Phillies as a scout when John Quinn, an executive, moved from the Braves to the Phillies. And then he retired in '74 when his health no longer allowed him to travel. But the final chapter in Judy's career had not yet been written. He was involved with the Baseball Hall of Fame in the early '70s to help consider who among the Negro League greats should be considered for induction into the Hall. The early choices were no-brainers: Page, Gibson, Leonard, Bell, and also Monty Irvin, whose great career was split equally between the Newark Eagles of the Negro League and the National League's New York Giants. Then in 1974, Johnson stepped down from his advisory role, and that was quickly followed by his peers naming him as the sixth Negro Leaguer to be inducted into the Hall. With all the greatness in the Negro Leagues, for Johnson to be the sixth man in was quite a testimony. So here's a photo of him holding his plaque, also the plaque itself, and finally, meaningfully, a photo of Anita and him with Commissioner Kuhn. Few of the Negro League greats would be alive for their own induction. It was indeed special that he and his wife and family were there. Reports are that he was so emotional in his speech, he was actually unable to complete it in its entirety. So what did Judy's peers say about him? Johnson was like a rock, a steadying influence on the club. He had a great brain, could anticipate a play, knew what his opponents were going to do. That of Jimmy Crutchfield, a teammate. Fellow Hall of Famer Willie Wells, he had intelligence and finesse. And Ted Page talked a lot about Johnson as a scientific player, someone who could play the position well, but was so knowledgeable about the game, he made a huge difference. In a different era, or in an era that was shared rather than separate, Johnson most likely would have become a manager and led his team to championships. We will never know. But we do know that Judy was the consummate professional, the consummate teammate, a mentor. So let's give Judy the last word. I love to teach baseball and would rather do it than anything. I even coach a sandlot team here in Wilmington. It's like putting a seed in the ground. You like to watch it develop. As long as they're ball players, they're my kids. I love them all. Judy passed away in 1989 at the age of 89, 4 years after his wife, and they're buried together in Wilmington. There's not a lot written about Judy. Interestingly, a handful of Negro League greats have great full-length books written about them, but not Judy for some reason. The best I could find was a short work by Ellen Rendell, written over 25 years ago, and also a very brief depiction that introduces Judy to youth. You can also check out Judy's bio on the SABR website by Thomas Kern. Thank you for listening. Thank you.
Okay, is it my turn, Sean?
Tom, well, before you start, Tom, did you go through the list of panelists that's coming up?
There we are. We've been led off by Ted Knorr and James Brunson. I pinch hit today, and we've got a great number of speakers, including Leslie Heafy next month. Please commend you to that. I think Leslie is with us today on the webinar. a great series coming up. You can see the topics and the frontline speakers.
I guess it's my turn now, Sean. I have some questions for Tom Kern. The first one's from Ryan Hunter, and he'd like to know if you have an idea what number Judy Johnson wore on his uniform.
Number 5.
There you go. Can't do better than that, Ryan. Ralph Horgan, who may be a relative, if he's got any O'Neills in his family, but Ralph asked, is the stadium in Chicago, is that Wrigley Field?
They played at Shoreline Park in the 24 series. So Shoreline Park was the venue of note at that time.
Okay. And Shoreline Park was in the south side as opposed to Wrigley's north side location. Here's another one. This is more of a comment than a question, but I'd like your feeling about this, Tom, and Sean, if he wants. Paul Julian points out that Major League Baseball needs to start posting in the ballparks Negro League pennants and championships in Pittsburgh, Homestead, Grays, and Pittsburgh Crawfords. Any comment on that, Tom?
That's a great idea. I'd love to hear Sean's thoughts. Sean?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I mean, with everything going on, Major League Baseball seems to be stepping up to do some things to recognize Negro League players and the teams. But I think that'd be a great idea, especially, for the teams, like you mentioned, like Pittsburgh can put the Grays and the Crawford pennants up. Detroit, Cleveland can do the same. Kansas City can do the same with the Royals. So all the teams that had Negro League cities, I should say, yeah, I think that'd be a great idea. Just got to make it happen, Paul.
There you go. Okay, here's one from an anonymous attendee, and he or she wants to know, where did the Hilldale team play in Philadelphia? I guess, where is Hilldale would be a good question. And did they play in Shibe Park?
Hilldale was based more up in the Darby area. I don't know Philadelphia real well. Darby is a little bit north of the downtown. Am I right to say that? I know I've got a good...
I think so.
And it's a good question about where all they played. Many of the Negro League teams would make the rounds, and some had arrangements with the Major League teams in the cities that they shared. We've just noted that Homestead played at Forbes Field, whereas the Crawfords, Gus Greenlee was flush with money enough at one point to build Greenlee Field himself for the team to be based. My surmise is that Hilldale probably played in a number of parks in Philadelphia, including the Major League sites.
Okay. And then, hate to put Sean on the spot, but here's a question. What's the status of the Josh Gibson for Hall of Fame issue?
Hall of Fame or MVP? Because he's in the Hall.
Yes, Josh Gibson for MVP.
Okay. Great question. Is Tom put up our MVP campaign website and T-shirts? Still nothing yet, as of yet. As again, this is not a decision made through Major League Baseball. It's a decision made through the Baseball Writers Association. And Bob Nightingale, who is a good friend, who's been a big advocate, who's also a voter, and Bob Nightingale's from USA Today, who's a big advocate for Josh. We communicate, once a month just to get updates. Last time we spoke was back in February. At that time, they were doing the Spinks Award. I think they removed the name off of the Spinks Award. And so, yeah, I get that question asked a lot. We don't know. But, really, I don't want to know when it's going to happen. I would like to be surprised, to be honest with you. Well, whether, Josh gets it or not, I'd rather be surprised. So hopefully one day I'll wake up and my phone is blowing up again. So we'll see.
Okay, that's all I got. So thanks, Tom, unless you have any last moments that you want to share.
Well, I love the question about how should the park, should they, and how could they honor the Negro Leagues? These are important venues to tell the story. And I think there should be, and in varying ways, clubs have done that. My wife Sarah and I live in Washington, D.C. area. We go to the Nationals Park, and there are recognitions of the Negro Leagues because Homestead did, in fact, play in Washington as well as Pittsburgh later in its existence. But I think this is a very important point more generally, that the statistics are the skeleton, but the stories, the nuances, the drama are the flesh on the leagues, the players, and what their legacy is. And so being able to tell the story in as many ways as possible and sharing this is incredibly important. So our hope is Major League Baseball takes this on front and center alongside how to amalgamate, integrate the stats. How do we also include the stories? I'll end with this. A great example is Leon Day. Leon Day pitched an opening day no-hitter. That should be part of the pantheon of the story alongside, was it Bob Feller?
Yep.
That also did that. So now we can speak to two opening day no-hitters. Those are how the story should be included to really raise the awareness.
I will say this too, as we wrap up, getting back to Major League Baseball, integrating the stats. You know, we've had the families of the Negro League family, I should say. I've heard from the commissioner's office, and they want me to get all the families together to talk about the process moving forward. That email came to me back in February, and so I'm waiting to hear back from them as when they want to actually have this meeting. Because there's a lot of questions that were asked from myself as well as other family members. Because when MLB made the announcement, it was pretty much just an announcement. And there was a lot of family members confused of the process and what's next, what's going to happen. And a lot of concerns is how this process is going to work. It's going to have asterisk marks next to these guys' names and things like that. So there's a lot of questions from the families of the Negro League players that would like to be answered from MLB. And so the commissioner did get back to me, and his office did get back to us. So we're supposed to meet with their historian, John Thorne, and talk about the process. So we'll definitely, as we move forward on that, any updates that we get during our webinars, we can definitely update you on that process as well. So if there's no other questions, again, thank you. Again, you see the shirts. We do our MVP campaign shirts. You can also go to our website, which is joshgibson.org, to register for the upcoming events, webinars. Your feedback is great. You know, we are planning our series number 2 for 2022. We have some great suggestions for our next series. If there's any other speakers or historians who might want to participate in our series number 2 for next year, please let us know. Or if you have any ideas of what you'd like to hear, please let us know that as well. But overall, we love for you. We love you guys joining us. We love doing these monthly webinars, giving you different perspectives and different speakers. And we'll see you next month. As Tom mentioned, Leslie, I think I just saw a text from her, a chat. She's our next speaker. I've known Leslie for a very long time. She's very well known in the Negro League industry, and we're excited to have her. She actually is our first female speaker coming up, so first of 3. So we're excited to have Leslie do her presentation next month, and hopefully we'll get a great turnout. So if there's any other questions, we'll wrap up. If anything else from you, Tom or Ted?
Thank you, everyone, for being a part of this today.
All right. Thank you. Glad you enjoyed it.